Ladies, let me ask you something raw, something that cuts through the noise of your daily grind. Have you ever stood at the edge of love, your heart pounding, wanting to leap, but paralyzed by the fear that opening up will only lead to a crash? That if you let someone in, really let them see you, they'll eventually walk away, leaving you to pick up the pieces? I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. My name is Elon Musk, the guy who spent his life chasing the impossible, building electric cars that defy the gas-guzzling status quo, launching rockets to Mars, and dreaming of a future where humanity isn't chained to one fragile planet. But when it comes to love, I've been a coward, a man who's built empires but flinched at the idea of building something as fragile and vital as a true, unguarded connection. Today, I'm not here to talk about reusable rockets or neural networks. I'm here to tell you about the one thing that's brought me to my knees: love, my greatest weakness. And the moment I realized that fear of it almost cost me everything. Picture this. You're sitting in a mansion worth millions, surrounded by sleek furniture, walls lined with awards, and a view that stretches across the California hills. You've got everything you thought you wanted: money, success, a legacy that's reshaping the world. But in the quiet of the night, when the hum of ambition fades, you're alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you're even capable of loving someone without them slipping through your fingers. That's where I was, not just once, but over and over, caught in a cycle of wanting connection, but terrified of what it demands. I faced down skeptics who said Tesla would fail, critics who called SpaceX a pipe dream, but nothing has scared me more than the idea of opening my heart and finding it's not enough. This isn't a story about business triumphs or engineering breakthroughs. It's about the raw, messy human struggle of learning to love without holding back, and why that struggle matters for every one of you listening, especially you women who've ever felt the sting of rejection or the weight of guarding your heart. I'm not here to sugarcoat things or give you a feel-good pep talk. If you're expecting a tidy motivational speech, you're in the wrong room. This is about the gut punch of realizing that the walls you've built to protect yourself are the same ones keeping you from the deep, meaningful connections you crave. It's about the moment I had to choose between the safety of emotional distance and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that this time, with this person, things could be different. I'm talking to you, yes, you, the woman who's been hurt, who's loved and lost, who's wondered if it's worth trying again. Maybe you've poured your heart into a relationship only to watch it crumble. Maybe you've held back, afraid that being your true self will scare someone away. Or maybe you're sitting there, successful, driven, with a life that looks perfect on paper, but inside you're wrestling with the same question I've asked myself: what if I'm not built for love? Let me take you back to the root of it, to the moment this fear took hold and started shaping every relationship I'd ever have. I want you to imagine a kid, not a billionaire, not a CEO, just a scrawny boy in Pretoria, South Africa, with a head full of wild ideas and a heart that hadn't yet learned to guard itself. That was me at 8 years old, spending every afternoon with my best friend Marcus, building Lego castles and dreaming up inventions that would make the world gasp. Marcus wasn't just a friend, he was the first person outside my family who got me, who saw the way my brain raced and didn't think it was weird. We'd sit for hours, plotting how we'd build robots or spaceships, laughing over our half-baked plans to change the universe. But then, one day, Marcus came to me with news that hit like a freight train. His dad got a promotion, and they were moving 800 miles away to Cape Town. I didn't get it. How could something as stupid as a job tear apart the most important friendship I'd ever had? We swore we'd stay close, letters, visits, the whole deal, and for a while we tried. I'd spend hours scribbling notes about my latest projects, my new school, the things I wished I could tell him in person. His letters came back full of stories about his new life, new friends, new adventures. But then the letters slowed, weeks turned into months. By the time a year had passed, Marcus was gone from my life, not because we fought or betrayed each other, but because life moved on and I wasn't part of it anymore. That was my first lesson in love, not the romantic kind, but the kind that makes you feel seen, valued, whole. And the lesson was brutal. Even the people who care about you can leave when something else pulls them away. Fast forward a few years, and I'm 12, standing on the edge of another loss. My family decided to move to Canada, chasing a better future. It meant leaving behind the few friends I'd scraped together after Marcus, the teachers who'd fueled my obsession with computers, and most painfully Sarah, the first girl who made my heart race. Sarah was different. She didn't laugh at my weird accent or my endless rants about science fiction. She listened, smiled, made me feel like I wasn't just the odd kid in the corner. I never told her how I felt, and when we moved, I thought that was the end of it. Years later, a mutual friend told me Sarah had liked me too, had been planning to tell me before I left. That hit harder than I expected. I'd lost something I didn't even know I had, not because I wasn't enough, but because life ripped us apart before we could find out. In Canada, I was the outsider. Again, new country, new school, new rules. Kids cared about hockey and parties. I cared about code and spaceships. I learned to be okay alone because trying to fit in meant sanding down the edges of who I was. But every time I let someone in, I braced for the moment they'd leave because they always did. Friends moved away, interests shifted, and I started to see relationships as temporary, like projects with an expiration date. That's when the walls went up. Not because I didn't want connection, but because I didn't know how to survive losing it again. Ladies, I know some of you get this. You felt that ache, that moment when you realize the person you thought would stay forever has one foot out the door. Maybe it was a friend, a partner, a family member, and maybe, like me, you started building your own walls, telling yourself it's safer to keep people at arm's length than to risk that pain again. But here's the kicker. Those walls don't just protect you, they trap you. They keep you from the kind of love that makes life worth living, the kind that makes you feel alive. I didn't see that for years. I thought I was being smart, strategic, like I was engineering my heart to withstand failure, but all I was doing was setting myself up to lose the very thing I wanted most. I'm here to tell you that love isn't a weakness you can outsmart. It's not a problem you can solve with logic or ambition. It's a leap, a risk, a plunge into the unknown. And if you're anything like me, that's the scariest thing you'll ever face. But stick with me, because this story isn't about staying broken. It's about what happens when you decide to tear down those walls and fight for the connection you deserve. Ladies, let's dive deeper into the mess of what makes us human. I've told you about the kid I was scrawny, dreaming of spaceships, hit hard by the loss of a best friend, and a first crush. Those early wounds weren't just fleeting childhood dramas, they were the foundation of a fear that dug its claws into me and shaped every relationship I'd try to build. I'm Elon Musk, the guy who spent decades solving problems most people call impossible: electric cars that outrun gas guzzlers, rockets that land themselves, AI that pushes the boundaries of what we think machines can do. But love? That's a puzzle I couldn't crack for years, not because I didn't want it, but because I was terrified of what it meant to truly let someone in. This isn't about the glitz of Silicon Valley or the roar of a Falcon 9 launch. It's about the quiet moments when you realize you've been running from the one thing that could make all your victories feel real: connection. For you women out there, strong, driven, maybe guarding your own heart, I want to take you through the next chapter of my story where those early lessons hardened into a blueprint for keeping love at a distance. Let's rewind to my teenage years after the move to Canada. I was 14, still the oddball with a South African accent, more comfortable with a computer than a crowd. I'd learned from losing Marcus and Sarah that people don't stick around, not because they're cruel, but because life pulls them in different directions. That realization didn't just sting, it rewired how I saw relationships. I started treating them like experiments, carefully controlled, never too invested, always ready for the inevitable end. You know that feeling, don't you? When you meet someone who lights you up, but there's a voice in your head whispering, don't get too close, they'll leave. For me, that voice wasn't just a whisper, it was a siren, blaring every time I got near someone who mattered. In Canada, making friends was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. I was the kid who'd rather debug code than join a pickup basketball game. But I wasn't a loner by choice. I craved connection, just didn't know how to make it stick. I'd watch other kids form tight-knit groups, laughing over things I didn't get, and I'd wonder what I was doing wrong. Was it my accent, my obsession with sci-fi novels, or was it just me too weird to belong? Every time I started to bond with someone, I'd brace for the moment they drift away. New school, new city, new priorities, and they always did. Not out of malice, but because that's how life works when you're young and the world keeps shifting under your feet. Each loss reinforced the lesson: don't let anyone become essential, because essential things break you when they're gone. By the time I was 16, back in Pretoria for my final years of high school, I was a pro at keeping my guard up. I'd built this internal firewall, let people in just enough to feel connected, but never enough to hurt when they left. Then I met Jennifer, and for the first time, I thought maybe I'd found someone who could change the equation. Jennifer was in my physics class, sharp as a tack, with a laugh that made my brain short circuit. She wasn't just smart, she got me. We'd spend hours debating quantum mechanics or dreaming up tech that could solve world hunger. For 6 months, I let myself believe she was different, that she'd stay, that I'd finally cracked the code on love. You ever meet someone like that? Someone who makes you feel like the best version of yourself, like you don't have to hide the parts others call strange? But then the cracks started showing. Jennifer got quieter, less present. Our late night talks about the future turned into one-word answers. I'd ask what was wrong, and she'd say, nothing, but I could feel her slipping away like sand through my fingers. 2 weeks before graduation, I found a letter in my locker. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter like something out of a movie, except this wasn't a happy ending. Jennifer wrote that she'd fallen for someone else, a guy from her drama class who was everything I wasn't, outgoing, popular, into the social scene she was starting to crave. She said she cared about me, that I was brilliant, but we were too different. She wanted a life I couldn't give her, one full of parties, friends, the kind of carefree fun I never understood. She wished me well, hoped we could stay friends, but needed space to figure out who she was becoming. Reading that letter felt like standing on a launch pad as a rocket misfired. I wasn't angry, not really. I was gutted. I'd been all in, or as all in as a 1 6-year-old with a fortified heart could be, and it still wasn't enough. Jennifer didn't betray me. She just chose something else, someone else. And that hurt worse than if she'd lied or cheated. It taught me that love could end not because you screwed up, but because people change, and sometimes they change into someone who doesn't choose you. For you ladies listening, I bet some of you know this pain, the kind where you give everything only to realize it's not about being enough, but about fitting into someone else's shifting world. That letter became a turning point. I decided love was a variable I couldn't control, so I'd minimize its impact. I'd care about people, sure, but I'd never let them hold the keys to my happiness. Sounds smart, right? Like I was engineering my life for resilience. But what I was really doing was building a cage, one that kept me safe but also kept me alone. I carried that mindset into college, first at Queen's University in Canada, then at the University of Pennsylvania. I made friends, dated a little, but always with one foot out the door. I'd be the guy who was fun to talk to, who'd help you debug your code or debate philosophy, but I'd never let you get close enough to see the real me, the one who was scared you'd leave if I did. This wasn't just about romance, it was about every connection. I'd meet people who seemed like they could be lifelong friends, but I'd hold back, waiting for the moment they'd move on. And they did new jobs, new cities, new lives. Each time, it confirmed what I'd learned. Relationships are temporary, so don't bet your heart on them. By the time I was in my early 22nd, starting my first companies, I'd turned emotional distance into an art form. Work became my shield. Building Zip2, then PayPal, gave me a reason to keep people at arm's length. Sorry, I'm swamped with coding, I'd say, or gotta focus on the business. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was, I was scared that if I let someone in, they'd see the parts of me that weren't a visionary or a genius, just a guy who'd been left behind too many times. Ladies, I know some of you are nodding right now. Maybe you've done the same, thrown yourself into your career, your goals, your hustle, because it feels safer than risking your heart. Maybe you've told yourself you're too busy for love, too focused on your dreams, when deep down, you're just afraid of what happens if you let someone close and they walk away. I get it. I lived it. But let me tell you something I wish I'd known then. That fear, that instinct to protect yourself, doesn't just shield you from pain, it robs you of the chance to feel truly alive. Love isn't a problem to be solved or a risk to be mitigated. It's the one thing that makes all the hard work, all the late nights, all the dreams worth chasing. And I was about to learn that the hard way as I stepped into my first real attempt at building something lasting, only to watch it crumble under the weight of my own defenses. Ladies, let's keep pushing forward, straight into the raw heart of what it means to love and lose. I'm Elon Musk, the guy who spent his life chasing the impossible, building Tesla to electrify the roads, SpaceX to colonize Mars, Neuralink to merge minds with machines. But while I was out there trying to rewrite the future, there was one challenge I kept dodging: how to love someone without a safety net. I've told you about the kid. I was scarred by the loss of a best friend and a first crush, wiring my brain to see every connection as a ticking time bomb. Those early wounds didn't just fade, they became the blueprint for how I approached love, especially when I thought I'd found someone who could change everything. This part of my story is about my first real love, the kind that makes you believe in forever, only to teach you that even the deepest bonds can break, not because of betrayal, but because people change. For you women listening, who've poured your heart into someone only to watch them slip away, this one's for you. It's about the pain of losing love and the trap of letting that pain define you. Let's go back to my late teens, back in Pretoria, where I was a gangly kid with big dreams and a heart still bruised from childhood losses. I was 16, Navigating the final stretch of high school at Pretoria Boys High, surrounded by guys who cared more about rugby than relativity. I'd learned to keep my distance, to protect myself by never letting anyone too close. But then Jennifer walked into my physics class, and everything shifted. She wasn't just another classmate. She was a spark bright, curious, with a mind that could keep up with mine. She loved science, laughed at my terrible jokes, and didn't flinch when I rambled about building computers or colonizing other planets. For the first time since Marcus, I felt seen, not as the weird kid with the funny accent, but as someone whose quirks were worth loving. You know that feeling, don't you, when you meet someone who makes you think, maybe I'm not too much, maybe I'm just enough? Jennifer and I became inseparable. We'd spend afternoons in the library, poring over physics, textbooks, debating theories, and sketching ideas for inventions that would probably never work but felt world-changing in the moment. We talked about the future, her going to university for engineering, me chasing tech dreams that sounded crazy even to me. For 6 months, I let myself believe in something permanent. I'd lie awake at night, imagining a life where we'd build things together, solve problems, maybe even change the world side by side. It wasn't just puppy love. It was the first time I thought I'd found someone who'd stay, no matter what life threw at us. Have you ever had that moment where you let yourself dream of a future with someone, even though a part of you is waiting for the other shoe to drop? But then things started to change. It was subtle at first. Jennifer was less excited about our late night study sessions, less engaged in our talks about quantum computing. She'd canceled plans to hang out with new friends from her drama club, people who were louder, flashier, into things I couldn't wrap my head around. I'd ask her what was going on, and she'd smile, say, "Nothing's wrong," but I could feel the distance growing, like a fault line splitting us apart. I tried to fix it, doubling down on our shared projects, cracking more jokes, being the guy I thought she wanted. But deep down, I knew something was off, and I was too scared to face it. You've been there, right? Sensing someone pulling away, but pretending it's all in your head because the truth is too heavy? 2 weeks before graduation, I found a letter in my locker. Not a text, not a call, a letter. Handwritten, like she needed the distance of paper to say what she couldn't face to face. I can still picture it, her neat handwriting, the way the ink smudged slightly on the page. She wrote that she cared about me, that I was brilliant, kind, one of a kind. But she'd fallen for someone else, a guy from her drama class, someone who fit into the social world she was starting to want. She said we were too different, that she needed to explore a life of parties, friends, things I didn't care about. She wasn't cruel, she didn't lie or cheat. She just chose a path I couldn't follow. She wished me well, hoped we could stay friends, but needed space to figure out who she was becoming. I stood there, letter in hand, feeling like the ground had vanished beneath me. It wasn't just a breakup, it was proof that even when you give everything, someone can still walk away because they want something else. That letter broke something in me, but it also built something a wall, thicker than before. I told myself love was a risk I couldn't afford. If Jennifer, who knew me better than anyone, could choose someone else, then what was the point of letting anyone in? I decided I'd never let my happiness depend on another person again. Sounds logical, doesn't it? Like I was optimizing my life for minimal damage. But what I was really doing was sentencing myself to a kind of loneliness that no amount of success could fix. For you ladies out there, I know some of you have felt this, the gut-wrenching realization that you can be everything someone says they want and still not be their choice. Maybe it was a partner who left for someone more exciting, or a friend who drifted away for a new crowd. It makes you question yourself, makes you wonder if you're too much or not enough. After Jennifer, I leaned harder into my work. I threw myself into coding, into building things, because machines don't leave you. Code doesn't change its mind and decide it wants a different programmer. By the time I was at Queen's University, then Penn, I was a master at keeping people at a distance. I'd make friends, go on dates, but I always held back a piece of myself, the piece that could get hurt. I'd be the guy who was fun to talk to, who would help you with your startup idea or debate AI ethics until 2 a.m., but I'd never let you see the part of me that was still reeling from that letter in my locker. I told myself this was strength, that I was building a life where I didn't need anyone, but the truth, I was terrified. Terrified that if I let someone in, they'd see the real me, not the visionary, not the guy with big ideas, but the one who'd been left behind too many times to believe in forever. That fear followed me into my 22nd as I started companies and chased dreams bigger than myself. Work became my fortress. When I was coding Zip2 or hustling to make PayPal work, I could tell myself I didn't have time for relationships. But deep down, I was hiding from the risk of loving someone and losing them again. I'd meet women smart, incredible women who'd spark something in me, but I'd keep them at arm's length, always ready for the moment they'd choose something else. And they often did, because I wasn't giving them a reason to stay. I was giving them half of me, the safe half, the one that could walk away unscathed. Ladies, I know some of you have done this too, held back because you're scared of being hurt again, scared that if you show your whole self, it won't be enough. But let me tell you, that half-hearted approach doesn't protect you. It just guarantees you'll miss out on the kind of love that makes life electric. I was about to learn that lesson the hard way, as I stepped into my first marriage, thinking I could engineer love like a project, only to watch it unravel because I didn't know how to show up fully. Ladies, let's keep peeling back the layers of this messy human struggle. I'm Elon Musk, the guy who spent his life tackling problems that seem insurmountable, building Tesla to redefine transportation, SpaceX to make humanity multiplanetary, and Neuralink to bridge the gap between brain and machine. But while I was out there chasing the stars, I was running from something far scarier, the vulnerability it takes to love someone fully. I've told you about my childhood losses, Marcus, Sarah, and the letter from Jennifer that cemented my fear that love is a gamble you're bound to lose. Those experiences didn't just hurt, they taught me to keep my heart locked away, to approach relationships like a calculated risk. This part of my story is about how that fear followed me into adulthood, into marriages and partnerships with incredible women, and how I kept repeating the same mistake, thinking I could love halfway and still build something lasting. For you women listening, those of you who've ever held back a piece of yourself to avoid getting hurt, this is about the cost of those walls and the realization that they were pushing away the very connections I craved. Let's jump to my late 22nd, when I was starting to make a name for myself in Silicon Valley. I'd sold Zip2, co-founded PayPal, and was riding the high of turning ideas into reality. On the outside, I was the guy who could do anything, build companies, disrupt industries, dream bigger than anyone else. But inside, I was still the kid who'd learned that love comes with an expiration date. Work was my safe space, a place where I could control the outcome, where failure meant tweaking the code, not losing a piece of myself. Relationships, though, they were a minefield. I wanted them, God. I wanted them, but every time I got close to someone, that old fear kicked in. They'll leave. They always do. So I developed a system, care enough to connect, but never enough to break if it ended. Sounds like a plan, right? Except it wasn't. It was a recipe for loneliness, and I was about to learn that the hard way. Enter Justine, my first wife. She was brilliant, sharp, driven, with a mind that could match mine in intensity. We met when I was at Queen's University, and she was everything I thought I wanted. Someone who understood my ambition, who could talk literature and philosophy one minute and debate the future of tech the next. We got married, had 5 kids, and built a life that looked perfect from the outside. I thought I'd cracked the code on love. Provide security, share big goals, be a good partner, and it'll work. But here's where I screwed up. I approached our marriage like a project, something I could optimize with logic and effort. I thought if I checked the boxes, house in the Bay Area, financial stability, intellectual partnership, love would just happen. But love isn't a startup. You can't engineer it with spreadsheets or late night strategy sessions. Justine needed more than a provider. She needed a husband who was present, not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't know how to do that. I'd spent years building walls to protect myself from the pain of losing Marcus, Sarah, Jennifer. Those walls didn't come down just because I put a ring on someone's finger. When Justine talked about her feelings, her frustrations, her dreams, her fears, I'd try to fix things like they were bugs in a program. She'd say she felt alone, and I'd offer solutions. Let's plan a trip, or I'll cut back on work. But what she really wanted was for me to show up, to let her see the parts of me I kept hidden, the doubts, the insecurities, the fear that if I gave her all of me, she'd find a reason to leave. I couldn't do it. Every time she got close, I'd retreat behind my fortress of work, telling myself I was doing it for us, for our family, for the mission to change the world. But the truth, I was scared. Scared that if I let her in completely, I'd lose her like I'd lost everyone else. After years of marriage, Justine sat me down and said words that hit harder than any business failure. You're an incredible father, but you're a distant husband. She wasn't wrong. I was there, physically present, helping with the kids, building our life, but emotionally, I was a million miles away. She needed a partner who could meet her in the messy, vulnerable moments, not just the triumphant ones. I tried to change, spent more time at home, listened more, planned family outings, but it was like tweaking the surface of a broken system. The core problem was me, still guarding my heart, still bracing for the day she'd decide I wasn't enough. When Justine asked for a divorce, It felt like a rocket exploding on the launch pad. I'd failed, not because I didn't care, but because I hadn't learned how to love her the way she deserved. She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because I wasn't giving her the whole me, just the parts I thought were safe to share. You'd think I'd learn, right? But I didn't. I jumped into another relationship, then another marriage with Tallulah. She was creative, vibrant, someone who got my obsession with tech and space. We married twice, believing each time we'd figure it out. But I kept making the same mistake. I'd show up with ideas, support, grand gestures, but never with my whole heart. Tallulah could feel it, that distance, that part of me I kept locked away. She'd call me out, say I was holding back, and I'd deflect with excuses. I'm building SpaceX, it's for humanity. Or Tesla's on the brink, I can't slow down. But the real reason was fear. Fear that if I gave her everything, she'd find someone better, someone who wasn't always half in, half out. And guess what? She did leave, not because she didn't care, but because I wasn't giving her a reason to stay. Ladies, I know some of you have been here. You've loved someone with everything you thought you could give, only to realize you were holding back the most important part, your unguarded self. Maybe you've told yourself it's safer to keep a piece of your heart locked away, that vulnerability is a luxury you can't afford. I get it. I lived that way for years, thinking I was protecting myself, when really I was sabotaging every chance at real connection. Justine, Tallulah, they were incredible women, not wrong for me, not lacking in any way. The problem was me, stuck in a loop of fear, unable to break free. But this story doesn't end with me staying stuck. I was about to hit a breaking point where I'd have to face that fear head on and decide whether I was willing to risk everything for the kind of love that makes life worth living. For you women out there who've ever felt like your heart's been through a war, hang with me because the next step is where things start to change. Ladies, we're diving deeper now into the part of this journey where the rubber meets the road. I'm Elon Musk, the guy who spends his life tackling the impossible, building Tesla to electrify the planet, SpaceX to colonize the stars, and Neuralink to rewire how we think. But all those challenges pale in comparison to the one I'm about to share, facing the truth about why I kept losing the people I loved. I've told you about my childhood scars losing Marcus, Sarah, and Jennifer, and how those losses built a fortress around my heart. I've shared how that fortress followed me into my marriages with Justine and Tallulah, where I thought I could love with one hand tied behind my back and still make it work. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. This chapter isn't about another heartbreak or another relationship gone wrong. It's about the moment I stopped running, looked in the mirror, and realized the problem wasn't the women I loved, it was me. For you women out there who've ever wondered why love keeps slipping through your fingers, this is about the hard, liberating work of owning your role in the story and choosing to change. By the time I hit my 42nd, I was a master at building things, companies, rockets, cars, but I was a rookie at building relationships that lasted. I'd been through two marriages, both with women who were brilliant, driven, and aligned with my vision for the future. Justine and Tallulah weren't just partners, they were forces of nature, people who could hold their own in a room full of big ideas. Yet both relationships ended the same way, with them walking away not because they didn't care, but because I wasn't showing up fully. I'd give them my time, my support, my brain, but never my whole heart. I told myself it was because I was busy saving the world, launching Falcon 9 second, or keeping Tesla from bankruptcy. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was holding back because I was terrified of being left again. You know that feeling, don't you? When you want to dive into love but keep one foot on the shore, just in case the tide pulls you under? After Tallulah, I tried again with Amber, then Claire, two more incredible women who sparked something in me. Amber was fiery, complex, someone who could match my intensity. Our relationship was a roller coaster, full of passion but also chaos, because neither of us knew how to be steady. We'd break up, get back together, drawn to the drama but unable to build something solid. With Claire, it felt different. She was an artist, a visionary in her own right, someone who understood my drive to push humanity forward while chasing her own creative dreams. We had a child together, a little human who changed everything. For a while, I thought we'd cracked it, that I'd finally found a way to make love stick. But even with Claire, I fell into the same trap. I'd be there supportive, engaged, talking about the future, but there was always a part of me I kept locked away, a part I didn't trust her to see. You ever do that? Show someone the polished version of you, but hide the messy, scared parts, hoping it's enough? Claire could feel it. She'd call me out, say I was present, but not fully there, like I was always preparing for the exit. I'd deflect, same as always, I'm swamped with SpaceX or Neuralinks at a critical stage. But she saw through it. She said she loved me, but she couldn't keep reaching for someone who was only half in. When we parted ways, it wasn't with anger or betrayal, it was exhaustion. She was tired of trying to break through my walls, and I was tired of pretending they weren't there. That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't just losing relationships, I was losing myself. I was so busy protecting my heart that I was missing out on the kind of love that makes life worth living. Ladies, have you ever reached that point where you realize the patterns you're stuck in aren't just hurting the people you love, they're hurting you? I couldn't keep running from that truth. After Claire, I did something I'd never done before. I sought help. I started working with a therapist, someone who could hold a mirror up to my life and force me to look at it. Let me tell you, that was harder than any boardroom battle or rocket launch. Building a company is tough, but sitting in a room, unpacking 40 years of fear, that's a different kind of courage. My therapist didn't sugarcoat it. She said my emotional distance wasn't strength, it was a defense mechanism, a cage I'd built to keep pain out, but ended up trapping me inside. She helped me see that Marcus, Sarah, Jennifer, Justine, Tallulah, Amber, Claire, they didn't leave because I was unlovable. They left because I wasn't giving them the real me, the one who was scared, vulnerable, human. I was giving them the CEO, the visionary, the guy who could solve problems but couldn't open his heart. That realization was like a punch to the gut. I'd spent my life thinking I was protecting myself, but all I was doing was creating the loneliness I feared most. My therapist asked me a question that stuck. What would happen if you loved someone without holding anything back? I didn't have an answer. I'd never done it. Every relationship I'd had was built on a foundation of caution, a calculation that if I kept part of myself safe, I'd survive the fallout. But surviving isn't living. Surviving is what you do when you're launching a rocket and it explodes on the pad. Living is what happens when you risk everything for something bigger than yourself, whether it's a mission to Mars or a connection with another human being. Ladies, I know some of you are carrying the same fear, maybe from a breakup, a betrayal, or just the slow drift of someone you loved. You've built your own walls, told yourself it's safer to keep love at a distance. But let me ask you, what's the cost of that safety? What are you missing by not showing up fully? Working with my therapist, I started to unravel the threads of my fear. It wasn't just about loss, it was about what those losses meant. When Marcus moved away, when Jennifer chose someone else, when Justine and Tallulah walked out, I took it as proof that I wasn't enough. But my therapist flipped the script. She said those people didn't leave because I was deficient. They left because I wasn't giving them a reason to stay. Um, I wasn't showing up as a full partner, someone who could be vulnerable, who could share the messy parts of life, not just the wins. That hit me hard. I'd spent decades thinking I was the problem, when really the problem was how I was holding myself back. For you women listening, I bet some of you have felt that too, the fear that you're not enough, that if you show your true self, flaws and all, you'll be rejected. But what if the rejection isn't about you? What if it's about the walls you've built, the parts you're hiding? This was the turning point. I started to see that love isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up, even when it's scary, even when you're not sure you'll make it through. I began to practice being present, not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't easy. Changing habits you've carried for decades is like rewriting the code for a rocket mid flight. But I started small, listening without trying to fix things, sharing my fears instead of burying them, letting myself feel the weight of love without bracing for its end. I'm not saying I got it right overnight. I'm still a work in progress, but for the first time, I saw a path forward, a way to love without fear, dictating the terms. Ladies, this is where the real work begins, where you decide to stop letting old wounds call the shots and start building the connections you deserve. The next step is where we unpack what it means to embrace vulnerability, not as a weakness, but as the key to everything you've been chasing. Ladies, we're getting to the heart of this now, where the real transformation begins. I'm Elon Musk, the guy who spent his life building things Tesla to electrify the world, SpaceX to conquer the stars, Neuralink to unlock the mind's potential. But all those feats, all those late nights, coding or watching rockets soar, don't hold a candle to the challenge of rebuilding how I approach love. I've shared how my childhood losses, Marcus, Sarah, Jennifer, taught me to guard my heart, how that fear followed me into marriages with Justine and Tallulah, and relationships with Amber and Claire, where I kept love at arm's length to avoid getting hurt. I've told you about the moment I faced the truth. My emotional walls weren't protecting me, they were pushing away the people I cared about most. Now, let's talk about what came next. The slow, messy, exhilarating work of learning to embrace vulnerability, not as a flaw, but as the key to the kind of love that makes life worth living. For you women out there who've ever held back to shield yourself from pain, this is about discovering that vulnerability is your greatest strength and how I started to live that truth. Um, After my breakup with Claire, I was at a crossroads. I'd spent decades treating love like a problem to solve, give enough, but not too much, care, but always be ready to walk away. It wasn't working. I'd built companies that changed industries, but I couldn't build a relationship that lasted. My therapist's words kept echoing, what would happen if you loved without holding anything back? That question wasn't just a challenge, it was a dare. Could I let go of the fear that defined me since I was 8? Could I show up fully, not as the guy who lands rockets or dreams of Mars, but as the man who's scared, flawed, and desperate for connection? I didn't know, but I was tired of losing. Tired of waking up in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, surrounded by everything I had worked for, but feeling like I was missing the one thing that mattered. You ever feel that? Like you've checked all the boxes, career, goals, success, but there's a hole in your chest that no achievement can fill? I started small because unlearning 40 years of self protection doesn't happen overnight. It's not like flipping a switch or debugging a line of code. It's more like training for a marathon, slow, ruling, with plenty of stumbles. My therapist pushed me to practice being present, not just in relationships, but in every interaction. I'd always been good at listening to solve problems, give me a technical issue, and I'd break it down to first principles. But listening to someone's heart, that was new territory. I started with friends, people I trusted, but had always kept at a distance. I'd ask them about their lives, not just the surface stuff, but the real things, their fears, their dreams, what kept them up at night. And I'd share mine, even when it felt like walking across a tightrope without a net. I'd admit when I was stressed about a SpaceX launch or worried I wasn't being a good enough father. Um, it was awkward, like learning a new language, but it was the first time I felt like I was connecting, not just performing. The real test came when I started dating again. I won't name names, this isn't about one person, but let's just say I met someone who made me want to try. She was smart, independent, with a spark that reminded me why I'd fallen for women like Justine or Claire. But this time, I didn't want to repeat the same script. I decided to show up differently, to let her see the parts of me I'd always hidden. One night, over dinner in a quiet Los Angeles restaurant, she asked me what I was most afraid of. My instinct was to deflect, say something about asteroid impacts or AI risks. But I took a breath and told the truth. I'm afraid of loving someone completely and having them leave anyway. It was the most honest thing I'd ever said on a date, and I braced for her to run. She didn't. She reached across the table, took my hand, and said, that's what makes you human. Ladies, have you ever had a moment like that? Where you let someone see the real you, and instead of pulling away, they lean in closer? That moment was a turning point. It showed me that vulnerability isn't a liability, it's a bridge. It's what lets you connect with someone on a level deeper than shared goals or witty banter. I started to practice it more, not just with her, but in every part of my life. I'd check in with my kids, not just about school or sports, but about how they were feeling, what they needed from me as a dad. I talked to my team at Tesla or SpaceX, not just about deadlines, but about the stress we were all carrying, the human side of chasing impossible dreams. It wasn't perfect. I'd still catch myself retreating, wanting to hide behind work or logic, but I was learning that love, whether it's romantic, familial, or platonic, demands you show up fully, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. For you women listening, I know vulnerability sounds like a risk. Maybe you've been burned before by a partner who walked away, a friend who betrayed you, or a world that told you to toughen up to survive. I get it. I spent years thinking strength meant keeping my heart under lock and key. But here's what I've learned. Strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about being brave enough to be touched. It's about saying, here I am, all of me, flaws and fears included, and trusting that the right people will stay. It's not naive, it's courageous. Think about the women you admire, the ones who've built empires, raised families, or just lived fiercely. They're not fearless, they're brave. They've learned to love, to connect, to show up, even when it hurts. That's the kind of strength I'm chasing now, and is the kind I want for you. I started to see vulnerability as a muscle, one you build with practice. Every time I shared a fear, admitted a doubt, or let someone see me struggle, that muscle grew stronger. It changed how I showed up in relationships, not just romantic ones, but with my kids, my friends, even myself. I I stopped seeing love as a risk to mitigate and started seeing it as a mission, like landing a rocket or building a sustainable future. You don't get to Mars by playing it safe. You get there by taking calculated risks, knowing some will fail but betting on the ones that succeed. Love is the same. You have to risk the crash to reach the stars. Ladies, I know some of you are standing at that launch pad right now, wondering if it's worth it to try again. I'm here to tell you it is. Not because it's guaranteed to work, but because the only way to find the love you deserve is to show up as the woman you are, fully, fiercely, without holding back. This journey isn't over for me. I'm still learning, still stumbling, still figuring out how to love without a safety net. But every step toward vulnerability feels like a step toward freedom. Freedom from the fear that's held me back, freedom to connect in ways I never thought possible. For you women out there who've built walls to protect your heart, I want you to know you're not alone. Those walls kept you safe, but they're also keeping you from the life you could have. The next part of the story is about what happens when you start to tear them down, when you choose courage over caution and build the kind of love that's worth every risk. Ladies, we've come a long way together, haven't we? I'm Elon Musk, the guy who spent his life chasing the impossible, building Tesla to power a sustainable future, SpaceX to make humanity a multiplanetary species, Neuralink to unlock the secrets of the mind. But all those missions, all those late nights and bold bets don't hold a candle to the journey I've been sharing with you, learning to love without fear. I've told you about the losses that shaped me, Marcus, Sarah, Jennifer, and how they built walls around my heart. I've walked you through my failures with Justine, Tallulah, Amber, and Claire, where I thought I could love halfway and still win. I've shared the moment I faced the truth. Those walls weren't protecting me. They were keeping me from the connections that make life electric. And I've opened up about the slow, messy work of embracing vulnerability, of showing up fully, even when it's terrifying. Now, we're at the final stretch, the part where I ask you to take this journey with me. This isn't just my story, it's a call to every woman listening who's ever held back, afraid of being hurt, to step into the courage it takes to love without a safety net. Let's be real, vulnerability is scary. It's not like launching a rocket, where you can calculate the risks, test the systems, and know the odds. Love is messier, wilder, like stepping into a storm with no guarantee you'll come out dry. But here's what I've learned, and what I want you to carry with you. The only way to find the kind of love that lights up your soul is to show up as your whole self, flaws, fears, dreams, and all. I spent decades thinking I could outsmart love, that I could give just enough to keep someone close without risking the pain of losing them. But that half-hearted approach didn't just cost me relationships, it cost me the chance to feel truly alive. For you women out there, strong, driven, maybe guarding your own heart, I'm here to tell you that love isn't your weakness, it's your superpower. And unlocking it starts with the courage to be seen, really seen by the people you care about. Let me paint a picture of what this looks like. A few years ago, after countless stumbles and hard-won lessons, I found myself sitting across from someone new. Not a partner, not yet, but someone who made me want to try again. We were at a quiet cafe in Palo Alto, the kind of place where the coffee's overpriced, but the conversations feel like they could change your life. She was talking about her passions, art, music, the way she saw the world, and I felt that spark, the one that says, this could be something, but old habits die hard. Part of me wanted to lean back, keep it light, throw up the walls that had kept me safe for so long. Instead, I did something different. I leaned in. I told her about a moment when I felt like I'd failed not as a CEO, but as a man. I shared a story about a late night drive through the Nevada desert after a tough day at Tesla when I pulled over and just sat there, wondering if I'd ever get this love thing right. I didn't have a solution, no grand plan, just the truth. And you know what? She didn't flinch. She shared her own story, her own fears, and in that moment, we weren't two people playing it safe. We were two humans connecting. That's what vulnerability does. It's not about spilling your guts to everyone you meet. It's about choosing the moments that matter and showing up fully in them. It's about saying, here's who I am, scars and all, and trusting that the right people will meet you there. For me, it's meant rethinking how I show up with my kids, my friends, even my teams at work. I've started having conversations that aren't just about deadlines or deliverables, but about what drives us, what scares us, what makes us feel alive. With my kids, it's sitting down and asking, what's going on in your world? And really listening, not just to their words, but to their hearts. With my teams, it's admitting when I'm stretched thin, when I'm worried we might not pull off the next big thing, and letting them see that I'm human, not just the guy with the big ideas. You ever try that? Just letting someone see the unpolished version of you. It's terrifying, but it's also freeing. For you ladies, I know this isn't easy. You've got your own stories, maybe a partner who left when you needed them most, a friend who faded away, or a world that told you to toughen up to survive. You've built walls, just like I did, because they kept you safe. But those walls come with a price. They keep out the pain, but they also keep out the love, the joy, the connections that make life worth living. I'm not saying you need to tear them down all at once. Start small. Share a truth you've been holding back with a friend, a family member, someone you're starting to care about. Maybe it's admitting you're scared of failing or that you're lonely even when you're surrounded by people. Maybe it's telling someone you love them, not knowing if they'll say it back. Those moments, those risks, they're the building blocks of the life you want. I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself a year from now, standing in a moment where you feel truly connected, not just to a partner, but to your friends, your family, yourself. Imagine a life where you're not hiding, not holding back, where you're loved for the woman you are, not the one you think you need to be. That's not a fantasy, it's a choice. It's the choice to show up, to be brave, to love like you're not afraid of falling. I'm not saying it's a straight line. God knows I'm still stumbling my way through it. But every time you choose courage over caution, you're one step closer to that life. You're one step closer to the kind of love that doesn't just fill the gaps, but sets your whole world on fire. Ladies, you are powerful. You're building careers, chasing dreams, shaping the world in ways that inspire me every day. But don't let that power stop at your heart. Don't let fear write the end of your story. I spent too long letting mine do just that, and I'm here to tell you it's not worth it. Love is the one mission you can't half-ass. It's the one thing worth risking everything for. So take that risk, start today, tell someone how you feel, share a piece of yourself you've been hiding, be the woman who loves fiercely, who shows up fully, who doesn't let the fear of loss steal her chance at joy. Because when you do, you'll find that love isn't your weakness, it's your greatest strength. And trust me, when you step into that strength, the world doesn't just notice, it changes.